All right, we're live. So, social Darwinism, and the idea is to funnel money to the very wealthy, and so we have that. And if money flows to the very wealthy, right? What are they? Money flows to the very wealthy. What are they going to do with this money? Because they're smarter and they know better. They'll do what? They'll produce goods. In fact, we have it right here. They'll produce. Oh, we have government action. Oh, what government action? What's the most important one? What is the one? If you believe in trickle-down economics, your number one proposal. For whom? Yeah, that's just regressive. So tax cuts. And so good economic times, a tax cut for the wealthy will keep it going. Bad economic times, a tax cut for the wealthy will get out of the bus. It's always tax cuts for the wealthy. Now, you can argue that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it always is. And what do they feel about regulations? Yeah, whether it be environmental regulations, regulating the stock market or banks, or what is anti-monopoly regulation called in the U.S.? And how is trickle-down economics? What's their attitude towards labor unions? No. And so you can see how business owners like trickle-down economics now because it potentially enriches them, but they hate labor unions too. And then what is it called? Things like Social Security or welfare or health care. Yeah, how do they feel about a safety net? No. All these things, they don't like programs that will do what to wages? Yeah, they want nothing that will raise wages, cut wages, more money in their hands. And so basically the rich aren't rich enough, the comfortable aren't comfortable enough. And so we had all this, didn't we get to, we just started the oh, so we didn't finish government action?
We started to talk about the problems.
Oh, let's do the problem. Did we get? What was the first problem we said in here?
Overproduction.
We got overproduction. We got that one right. Did we get any others?
There was no guarantee that we use the money for supply.
Speculation. We talk about Florida.
Yeah, we have the stock market and real estate.
Stock market, real estate, very good. And so those are two huge problems. I mean, every time there's going to be a tax cut for the very wealthy, there's always a speculative bubble. Always. We saw this in the 1920s. The next really big tax cut for the wealthy would be in the 1980s, and there was a huge speculative bubble. There was a big tax cut in 2001 and 2003 for the very wealthy, and that led to a massive speculative bubble. And without a doubt, a speculative bubble was beginning in 2019 because President Trump's really only major legislative action was successful. Was huge tax cuts for the very wealthy. And the bubble you can see start in 2019. And then something got in the way.
COVID.
Yeah, that little COVID issue and a crash of the stock market and destruction of the economy, it appeared like. And 4 years ago, we're nearing in on the equivalent of 9/11 dying every day. And people forgot how bad it was in 2020. There were 3,000 to 5,000 people dying every day. So back to this. The reason I'm saying this is because once again I was alerted to people not remembering how bad it was. Refrigerator trucks parked in front of morgues. But so that bothered me. So now you get to be bothered by it. And those are the biggies. But the biggest one, the most important one, if your goal is to put money in the hands of the wealthy, guess who's going to get richer? Oh, did we get to this? Supply side economics. All right, good. So we got all this sound effects. Sound effects are fun. The inequality of wealth went up dramatically because that's the goal. The goal is if the rich have more money, they'll invest it. And so obviously the tax cuts, we're talking direct financial gain. Remember, Andrew Mellon himself got an $800,000 tax cut from the tax bill he wrote. So monopoly is going to be created. By 1929, 200 corporations had half of all the business activity in the United States. Here are the mergers. The blue line are the mergers that have went through the Federal Trade Commission. Mergers have to go through the Federal Trade Commission, any merger that might affect antitrust. For most of your life, they just rubber stamped all mergers. Now they're actually really stopping them, so it's interesting. all the mergers. There was a big collapse during the crash. Then mergers would pick up again, and then Roosevelt administration would stop that. And there was a bull market, fueling speculation. What do you call a market that's bad? What animal?
Bear.
Bear. What are we now? Pretty bullish. Yeah, economy had a lot of good days. Well, we don't care. S&P 500. I mean, if you check right now, what is it? What is it? Huh? No, I don't mean that. What is the Dow? The Dow's only 30 companies. That's what I mean. In fact, I looked at that today. That was kind of funny. Yeah, I looked at the stock market, and because I wanted to get the numbers again. And so yeah, the Dow average kind of went down today. Where are we at here? Yeah, the overall trend of the Dow market's been going up pretty consistently. Oops. 39,000. It's so funny. I'll tell you what the Dow is in just a second. We got to talk a little bit about it. And next, the richest 1% had approximately 51% of the wealth. Now, what's 51% of the wealth? Remember, that's a guess, because how do you measure products that have a really kind of variable price range? I mean, art. William Randolph Hearst bought as much Renaissance art as he could buy. He cornered the market on Renaissance art. He bought everything he could when times were good, so the price was high. That's because people wanted. Times are bad, the price of fine art tanks because people aren't buying it. The point is, it's really hard to measure wealth. But one important thing about this, why was wealth going up so much for the richest 1%? Because their income was going up so much. And it's important to understand, anybody who has excess wealth or excess income, if you have excess income beyond what you need to survive, you can accumulate wealth. You can invest it, you can hoard it, you can bury it in your backyard or whatever. Most people then, as in today, barely make enough to survive. Barely. I mean that because most people have to go into debt to do things like buy homes, therefore, people are barely making it. Doesn't mean they're not doing fine and happy and healthy, just that there's not a lot extra to accumulate wealth. And lastly, so trickle-down economics worked really well in its #1 goal of putting wealth into the hands of the very wealthy. So this is a graph that goes up through 2012, and the red, that's the amount of wealth in the top 1%. The yellow, that's the amount of wealth in the top 0.1%. So 51% in 1929, just under 25%. The top 0.01%, 9% in 1929. This is what it was in 2012, 11%, 22, 41. It's closer to anywhere from 50 to 60% for the top 1%. Maybe more. I mean, the richest 3 families in the United States have more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. Yeah, but they're not in the top 3. But they're really rich. The richest 3, the Walton family, the Bezos, Walton's Walmart. It's Bezos, and then my mind is slipping. Yeah, it is Gates family. After Gates' divorce, they still count his wife as part of the family. Same with Bezos, and so that's when you count it. Yeah, the name just slipped. But the families you mentioned are super rich too. So it worked. And here's the important thing. The gap between the rich and the poor. Now, you can say this is good policy or bad policy. This is something you have to decide. But it's policy. You don't have to have that. You could have an incredibly large gap between the rich and the poor, or you could have working people make more money. As you can see happen in the from 1940 to 1980. You can have that. Now, you have to decide for yourself, but it's policy. These are decisions that governments make, and governments, at least we'd like to think, are accountable to the people. So these are decisions that can happen, or they can be reversed. It's important to understand that. So back to this then. We already have this, so don't worry about this. So the stock market in period invincible. Buy, buy, buy. Okay, that's from the Onion. This is actually the day before Black Tuesday. They're fake cartoon for the Black Tuesday. So let's get to the Great Depression. And this is one of the most iconic signs, and it's really pretty scary. So a picture of the world's highest standard of living. There's no way like the American way, as people are all lined up for food. It's a tragedy of the United States that the entire world went through. This was a worldwide economic disaster. Yeah. This unknown lunatic politician in Germany, for example, would all of a sudden become Chancellor of Germany because of the Great Depression. 29 to, okay, the end is a little bit vague, but we'll put down 39. Because you can say that you can really see it start ending by the wartime. Even though it looked like it was over in 37. So when Hoover was inaugurated, it seemed like prosperity. It seemed like the country will go on forever. And the thing about Hoover, he had this reputation as hardworking guy. So here's this cartoon of all these people trying to come to Hoover to ask for favors, but he's doing the nation's needs. He's rolling up his sleeves and getting to work. He had that reputation. Trust me, that reputation would be a little different in about 4 years. And the feeling was it would go on forever, even though there were already rumblings if people either had the data or at least could see a little bit what we can see now. I love this picture of them riding to the inauguration. There's Coolidge and Hoover. Don't they look like they're trying to get as far away as possible as they can? They did not like each other. Coolidge and his Secretary of Commerce, the successor of Hoover. And this is the first position that Hoover had ever been elected to. And so, summer 1929, the recession actually had already begun. And you can see it by, this is a couple advertisements for real estate, for property. And the prices were going down. It seemed like the boom was going on, but it was already beginning to crash. The Eagle Company, this is a market for their car, and they are reducing the price, and this is one of many car companies that would disappear in the Great Depression. In 2008, that crash that happened, the recession had actually begun the summer before, and the economy was in really bad shape. In fact, Congress tried to do a stimulus in the fall of 2007, and didn't really get much better. So, but the stock market bubble hid a lot of it. It gave the appearance of prosperity, even though the vast majority of people did not invest in the stock market, just like today. Most people do not invest in the stock market. It's more today, but not much more. About 2/3 do not invest in the stock market. What? Yeah, for example, I have a little bit in for my retirement, but most people don't. It's not the money. And you have to have extra money. If you don't have extra money, you're in debt. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have money, yeah. And so, the stock market bubble hit. And a couple of things you need to know. First off, part of the reason the bubble got big was the real estate bubble crashing. So what happened is you had all these people investing in Florida real estate, and they're buying land sight unseen, aka swamp land. And when the bubble burst, they lost money. But they're not the only ones who lost money. If speculators lost money in Florida real estate, who else lost money? Where did they get the money from? Some of the land banks. Did you say banks? I didn't hear you. So I think I heard banks too. I heard banks from both sides, and I couldn't tell which side it was coming from. Banks. Banks lost their shirts. And banks were already in trouble because the farm economy had already crashed. And so think about it for a second. You lose money here, the banks lose money. What should you do if you just lost a bunch of money in speculation? Okay, logically, would this be a time to kind of step back, reevaluate your investments, and be more careful? I liken it to someone who's addicted to gambling. What do? Double down. Let's do it again. In fact, it's really kind of appropriate that the stock market is very much like a casino. And it becomes addictive to, you might get more money. Just, oh, wow, I can make this great investment. And a lot of it is kind of luck. And so that would trigger the stock market boom as people double down. And remember the boom bust cycle? You have overproduction. What does everybody do when there's overproduction and prices begin to drop and they can't pay back their debts? What do? Well, even before they quit buying stuff, what did you say? They produce more. They always produce more. Same thing here. You lose money in speculation, buy more. Buy more, speculate more. One more bet. One more, and I could make it all worthwhile. You know anybody who's addicted to gambling, which there's a couple of them, remember my family, it's actually really scary to watch that cycle. I had to do it kind of like cousins, but I saw it and it was horrible on the family. Moving on, and the banks pushed it because the banks lost money in Florida and they want to make it back by giving even easier margin rules for speculators. So the banks are pushing it too. And there's no regulation on banks. And remember the margin rules. You put 10% down and got $900 in debt. Or I'm sorry, $900, you got to borrow that. The collateral was a stock. If the stock value went up, fine. This is supposed to say, if you lose money, remember what I told you in the video. You have to cover when. You have to cover the difference. The debtor. When do you have to cover? Immediately. If your stock value dropped by 50%, you got to come up with $500 now. If you had to borrow to buy the stock, where are you going to get the money from? If you bought a lot of stock on margin and the stock values drop, do you want to still be holding that stock? So even a little drop in the stock market will lead to feverishly selling. So debt began to skyrocket. As people tried to make up their difference, debt skyrocketed. And so when the stock market crash hit, there were a couple bubbles. But even though the depression had already begun, the stock market reached its peak in September 1929, months after the recession had already begun. Now, the stock market value here was 381. The Dow Jones average was 381. The Dow Jones is a very crude measure of the stock market. They take the leading 30 corporations, a combination of the number of stocks they sell and the value of the stock, and they come up with a ratio. You can look up on Wikipedia, and it has a ratio. I don't really care much about the ratio. This is just a ratio. And so they couldn't sell as fast. The values were different dollars, so it's 381. And that was like unheard of heights. Today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is just under 40,000. Don't read too much into it, it's just a ratio. So the number itself just gives you a very crude indication. And there's other ratios, like for example, you might have heard of the Standard & Poor's or the S&P average. It's a different formula, but they have one for like the S&P 100 biggest corporations. S&P 500, the 500. NASDAQ or tech stocks, same kind of ratio. They do a ratio, everyone uses a different formula. There's the New York Times as a stock average. The point is just kind of a measurement of how the stock market is doing. But by September 29, even though they had reached the heights, this was the first quarter where companies began to acknowledge, and they didn't have to acknowledge they were losing money, but it started to come out that profits are dropping. And if profits are dropping, if you own a stock of a company and its profits are dropping, that might be an indication that the value of the stock might do what down the road? Go down. So people started selling, and there were a few panicky sell-offs in the next month, and then a rebound, go up, rebound, go up, a rebound, down. And so, on October 24th, 1929, was a massive crash, Black Thursday. The stock market was already significantly lower, about a quarter lower, and then there was a crash. And this crash shocked people. It was so bad that they actually shut down the stock market the next day. That's happened a couple times. In my lifetime, I remember that happened in 1987, and it happened a couple times in your lifetime. But they literally just cut off trading because it was dropping so fast. 2008 and during COVID, 2020, 4 years ago. Yeah. And the government, all the leaders from various governments, everybody from the governor of New York, remember, stock market's in New York, the head of the Federal Reserve, Hoover gave 2 radio addresses telling people that the stock market's fine. Your banks are healthy. Your money's okay in the banks. Have faith. The biggest one was Andrew Mellon. Not only gave on national radio and in newspapers said the stock market is fine. The stock market is fine. It didn't appear that way. The next day, Black Monday, even bigger drop. Mellon went out again and gave the same radio address that night that the stock market is fine. But does anybody want to guess what Mellon had already told his brokers to do? Sell everything. Now, what was he doing then to the American public? Lying. He was lying. And was it a lie because he might have justified it by saying, hey, I'm an individual stockbroker, but as a head of the as Secretary of the Treasury, I don't want the economy to crash. But yeah, he was selling. And then the biggie, put a star by it, Black Tuesday. Black Tuesday actually might not have been the biggest crash as Black Monday, but it happened 3 big crashes in a row, and it was so bad and it was so shocking. And it actually started the day doing pretty well. There was a little bit of burst, and there was cheering and overjoyed, and people went to the stock market or were nervously checking their ticker tape machine, and it was like, oh, things are going to be fine. That is a ticker tape machine. So it's hooked up by telegraph, so go through telegraph lines, and through the ticker tape machine, they did the same thing for telegrams now, it would automatically print from the telegraph line on this little thin piece of paper where this would start. Here's the stock market, October 29th, 1929. And it would just go alphabetical order, all the stocks being sold on the stock market and have its value. Kind of a code that the stock market uses. And if you ever look at the stock market, it has 3 and now 4-letter little abbreviations for every company. That comes from the ticker tape machine because it's so small. And it would just go in alphabetical order, print all the prices of the values of the stock, and then when we got to the end, it would start over. So there's just this continuous line. And you would turn it on and go, let's check the stock. And normally you might check every hour, but they're checking feverishly. And they're going through and things, oh, it's good, everything's okay. Everything's okay. Here's a few for that day. And then a few big brokers sold a stock. And that triggered a panic. And that triggered a crash. Overnight. Not overnight, just an hour. It went from everything's fine to sell frantically. And brokers sitting in places outside are calling their men in the stock exchange and sell everything. And they're reading, oh God, we're losing everything. Sell. I won't be able to make my margin call. Sell. And then the telegraph lines got overwhelmed. And for 2 hours nationwide, all information in the stock market ended. So just imagine you're in the middle of a panic. Oh God, and then nothing. That's hair on fire panic. Ah! And that led to absolute just sell everything. 16 million shares were sold that day, an unprecedented amount. And once people started selling, the price just tumbled. It was chaos. And 15,000 miles of ticker tape was used on that day alone because people never shut off their machines. What did they do with all that ticker tape? You'll see in a sec. And to give you an idea how bad it was, $16 billion in paper value were lost in just October alone. Unprecedented amount. Now, when I mean paper value, it's not that you had $16 billion sitting there. It was you thought you had $16 billion, or you thought you had this much worth of stock, and now it's $16 billion less value in stock. So you lost value of stock. You thought you had that money. And remember the big thing about this. People were using the value of stock and doing what with that value of stock? Say it again. Making it, you're using that as collateral for investments. And so if that stock value goes down, almost all of that is going to have to be covered immediately. You think people had that money? I should add, today, billionaires don't have a lot of money on hand. Let me rephrase that. Billionaires don't have money like you would think they have money. Okay, they might have a lot of money on hand compared to, let's say, probably most of us. But they have assets, stocks, real estate, and they just constantly borrow. They just constantly borrow money. That's how, and they do that partially for tax reasons too. There's lots of reasons. They don't have money on hand. They borrow. So, what do you do with all the ticker tape? Oh, that's outside the stock market. That's the panicky afternoon, and everyone's going, our life is over. Remember I told you in a boom, it's almost like a euphoria? So what's a bust like? It's all over. That's why they say the ticker tape. And so ticker tape parades would begin with the invention of the ticker tape back about 1911. Or sorry, not 1911, 1907. And what they are is they would drop bags of these ticker tapes as they do parades down Fifth Avenue in New York City, the Avenue of the Americas in Manhattan. So you go through all these skyscrapers and they take the bags of used up ticker tape and drop them. So they kind of float down and lead to a spectacular parade. And of course, somebody's going to have to clean that up. So that's Amelia Earhart, the great aviator who would die 9 years after he disappeared. It's hard to see, but right there, where is he at? That's John Glenn. You know who John Glenn is? The first American to orbit the Earth. And today, they don't use ticker tape machines anymore, obviously, but they still make fake ticker tape for ticker tape parades. So they can have the same kind of long strings. All right, so that's a ticker tape parade. This is a great cartoon showing the highs and lows. So here is stock boom. Hurrah for the boom, I want to buy. Stocks would never go down. Excuse me, I sneezed. Everything has got, I like this. Then down here, the stock slump. Everything has gone to smash. Smash means bad. That's it. Too bad that is not used anymore. It's gone to smash. I'm going to sell whatever I can get. But if everyone's selling at the same time, what happens to the price? Here's a couple. That variety is one of the most famous ones. Stock market lays an egg. And there's one more thing, and I chose this one. Here's the New York Times. And still, wasn't even close to the biggest newspaper in New York City at that time. But rally at close. Bankers are optimistic. They're still doing it. They're trying. And here is the New York index of stock prices. But all I want to show you this is look at the class by 32. It would not reach the same the same value in stocks into the late 1960s when Lyndon Johnson was president. And here are all the biggest stock market collapses by percentage. The biggest one was 1987. That was chaos. Here's a couple from 2020. Here's Black Monday, here's Black Tuesday. Black Monday was actually worse, but since Black Tuesday kind of like culminated it, that's why people remember that more. And you see a couple more, like 32 is a bad one, etc. So that leads directly into the Great Depression. Now, what's Great Depression? There's no set definition of a depression. So this is what we have to get for a depression. A depression is long-term unemployment. Long-term unemployment, long-term economic decline. There's no set definition. There's no real set definition for the economic decline called a recession. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot. Long-term unemployment, long-term economic decline, add one more thing, a credit freeze. Depressions always have a credit freeze. A credit freeze is where banks are afraid to loan money. There's no set definition of a time. It's more just a feeling when it happens. It's just a set, like a feeling. But after the Great Depression, nobody wants to call any economic downturn a depression. I think for obvious reasons. Yeah. Economic decline and a credit freeze. Without a doubt, in your lifetime, so beginning in 2007 through 2012, we were in a depression by any definition. But nobody wanted to call it a depression because nobody wanted to be saddled with a depression. So they called it the Great Recession, which I find kind of amusing. It was that bad. That's the worst economic downturn for the United States since the Great Depression. You guys were 1, 2, those heady days. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of similarity. You know, Roosevelt took over the presidency in the middle of the Depression, and so did Obama. So let's get to this. By year end, $25 billion in paper losses. And that means that's $25 billion that people, they couldn't make the margin calls, that they couldn't pay back their debts. People lost their shirts. The people who had the value in the stock market. Now, this does not, that alone does not necessarily affect the rest of the economy. But if they can't pay back their debts and banks can't make any more loans back, that destroys the economy. Production tanked overnight. If production goes down a third, what's going to happen to unemployment? All of a sudden, too, all this money in circulation was out of circulation. And the biggie, car sales dropped by a third. Overnight, the most important consumer product collapsed. And all those workers who made cars or tires or whatever out of work. By 32, the worst year of the economy, the gross domestic product, the GDP, dropped by a third. If you did not know that the GDP stood for gross domestic product, please write down gross domestic product. So if you did not know what GDP stood for, and I know some of you did, but I also know some of you didn't, the gross domestic product is a very crude measure of the entire size of the economy, the value of all goods and services. So that's a gross domestic product, dropped by a third. So there's a height in 28, went down by that much. And that means the entire economy just shrunk, shriveled up. So the amount of money in circulation dropped by a third. Oh, sure, there's money out there, but if you had money at this time, are you thinking, gee, it's a good time to invest in a company? Let's start a business. What are you doing with your money if you have it? Yeah, would you put it in a bank, by the way? No. Especially after you see the next one. 9,000 banks failed. If this many banks failed, the banks that survived, are they doing well? Probably not doing very well. Would you put your money in a bank? So my great-grandfather, the same one who had a German name and his store was attacked during World War I, he started putting general store in the 20s and 30s. It's mostly change, coins, that's what they get. He started putting his coins, his profit he would make and putting in big pickle jars and putting and burying it in the backyard. Because he was so afraid of the banks. And then he died of a heart attack quite suddenly. And late 1930s. And I guess my uncle looked all over for the jars and only found a couple of them. And so somewhere in Papillion, Nebraska are a bunch of jars of mostly silver coins. Now, so at his his daughter, my grandma's funeral. My mom and I were driving around Papillion, the town, it's one of the places where she remembered. I'm really glad we did that. And we said, well, let's go where the old store was. And the old store is gone now. Anybody want to guess? He was afraid of banks, and now the store is a bank parking lot. And under the parking lot somewhere are probably those jars of change in the bank parking lot. The weird irony of ironies. Now, saying that was a great thing we did. But it was terrible economic times. Here shows, and let's get to this. We don't know the exact unemployment rate. Unemployment is really hard to figure because they can really only do a pretty crude measure to this day of people looking for jobs. If you're in a place like Akron, Ohio in 1932 and you're unemployed, you're not really looking for a job either. Anybody know what they make in Akron, Ohio? Firestone. What do they make? Tires. Is anyone buying cars? The unemployment rate in Akron was about 80%. What are you going to do? Who's going to hire you? You don't have a job. What are you going to do? Who's hiring? And think about it for a second. It's not just people making tires. Okay, they don't have a job, so they're not going to restaurants anymore. So it ripples everywhere. It ripples everywhere. Other places were not hit as bad. The big car places like Detroit, devastated. So, what are the causes? Here's another one. You can imagine how many people are going to be unhoused, lose their homes. We have an issue with that today because home prices are so expensive, rents are so high. You don't have a place to live. You really can't function in society. How do you get a bank account if you don't have an address? It's really hard. But back to this, overproduction. So the first cause, overproduction, we did this boom bust cycle. And I like this one. These are foreclosed cars in 1932. People couldn't afford to make the payments anymore. If you have money and want to buy a car, that'd be the time to buy it. And so the big three areas crashed. Automobiles, construction, and it was all consumer electronics, but I generically say radios. Because radios were the one that caught everyone's imagination. But think about everything from washing machines to refrigerators to toasters. All these things were brand new. Now, I want everyone to think for just a second. Let's say you can't make cars anymore. Let's say people aren't buying cars. So people aren't driving as much. What does that affect for the economy? What do you need to make a car and make a car operate and have the whole apparatus for automobiles? Lots of steel, high quality steel. What else you need? Quick. So you need oil. That's an entire refining industry. Everything from the well to the refinery. Oh, speaking of that, so what do you do when you have to get, we call it gas for whatever weird reason in the United States. Well, you go get petrol, and where do you get that from? You just pull up to the refinery, hey, give me some petrol. Oh, so you need gas stations. This whole apparatus to get gas out there, whether it be tanker trucks, pipelines. What else do you need for cars? Rubber, copper, all kinds of electric, windshields, glass. For air, things are too, you want to cut weight, and especially an old car, what would they use in cars to cut weight? Aluminum too expensive. There, it's not quite. In 2 years. Wood. You go to old Model T, there's wood pieces all over. Today we use plastic. And what else do you need? So leather, and soon plastic seats, but leather seats there. Huh? Yeah, carpet would go on the floor. And then, okay, now you have a car. Now what? What do you need?
Roads.
Roads! Where do roads come from? By the way, what a massive government aid for business. The U.S. government built roads. That means taxpayers built them. Car companies would never have made it without roads. I mean, what a massive, just direct, huge aid for business. Look, those are your roads. So you got to build roads, so you have all the money and all the crews, everything that work to build the roads and then maintain the roads. Do you need them? Oh, your car breaks down. What do you need? All those things and all the tools, all the spare parts. And then just think about basic things. A lot of people driving, they're driving, oh, I'm hungry. What do you need? You know, most restaurants, the beginnings of drive-ins and fast food, it's coming. It is because of cars. And you're driving along, and now you're tired. A hotel for motorists. A motor hotel. A motel. That's where motel comes from, a motor hotel. So, do you get the point here? Now, why do we go through all that? If you can't buy cars, what does it affect? Everything. Everything. And once people quit, and once people lose their jobs, they're not buying products. They're not going to the store. They're not going out to eat. So it ripples even more. And then it snowballs and snowballs and gets worse and worse. And so prices begin to drop, profits begin to drop, and that's when I mentioned before they produce more. They try to get out of debt, but by producing more, they get in more debt. That's exactly what happened in 1927 or 1928, 1929. That's exactly what happened in 2007, 2008. That's when you start getting the cutbacks. So we're just going through the boom-bust cycle. Do you remember the economists who came up with the boom-bust cycle? Yeah, Marx. But Marx did it because he would say this proves capitalism is flawed. Conservative and liberal economics, therefore, are going to be an effort to try to keep some form of capitalism, but to avoid bust or get out of a bust is basically what economics is. And once demand tanks, sales tank, all this is going to happen. Boom, we get to the bust. All this was happening as the stock market was reaching its highest point ever. Because it's kind of invisible at first. And so the recession actually began that summer. And so that's the first thing, overproduction. Number two, are you ready for number two? It's going to blow your mind. Oh, I like this one. I almost forgot this cartoon. I think this is great. 28. Look at the Rolls Royce. You're like doing well. 29, 30, 31, 32. That's a pretty good cartoon. I like that one. That's clever in a very dark way, isn't it? Speculation. Over speculation. And I like that New York Times, the worldwide fever of stock speculation. And there were people getting worried about the stock market speculation, but nobody really knew what to do or unwilling to do what was necessary. Unwilling to do what was necessary. And so, as we have seen, the tax cuts were not going to production. Especially, think about when the economy started slipping at the end of 28 into 29. Even if they weren't thinking about a recession, they're thinking profits are lower. Wouldn't it be just easier to speculate? Prices are going up like mad. Pick those apples off those trees. You're a sucker if you don't. So it was not trickling down, though. If it's not trickling down, no one's buying the overproduction. But at this time, the top 1% had about 90% of the stock. What is it today? It's a little bit lower because a lot of retirement accounts, state retirement accounts, have stock. So for example, I'm in the teacher's retirement system. I will get a pension after I retire. So basically I'm taking slightly less pay today, but I will be paid about 60% of my salary for the rest of my life after I retire. Oh yeah, there are benefits. Now, having a job that I have. I know you can all see the liabilities, right? I mean, look around. Yeah, we can see. No, there are definitely benefits. Now, almost no job, most jobs do not have that. So it's a big deal for teachers, or most government employees in Montana. But back to this. So the Montana teacher retirement system, they take the money they have and they buy stock. And that's how they fund retirement. Did everyone catch that? So that's how come it's not, it's a little bit harder to say who has all the stock today. Tomorrow, do you want to finish this? If you're gonna be gone Thursday and Friday, please let me know. If you're gonna be here tomorrow, I'm gonna give you a bunch of stuff. Oh, no, I get paid, but what happened is, they have a pool of money. And so if the market crashes, the pool drops. That's actually, it's a very tricky thing because it's in our state constitution to pay. And so they have to. Now, some states don't have that, and some teachers don't get pensions. Moving on. Okay, this was actually this. And you have to come. We're not done, we're not done. I want it all of us. I want it 90% all of us. Okay? I want everyone must have all night. I want the bottom 90% on. I'm giving the test. That's what I'm doing. No, you were not.
I'll leave you to go.
This one has also. And then like 2 more. On 516 and 518 in the review book, there's 8 multiple choice questions. The key is in Teams to do it. It's on Teams. And then also on Teams. Do those extra.
Okay.
You want to do it? So, no, this, don't. This will be due, this review packet will be due the Monday after the APUSH. So we got lots of time. I'm just giving it to you now, okay? This will be. Yes.
If you think the stock market's going to
Oh, cryptos. It's a total scam. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a total scam. And anyone does that, I would beg them.
it confuses me.
Oh, yeah, there's a chance, there's a bubble, there's a chance to make money off it. But it's real.
There's a few like corporations that fall involved, and if you're trying to be an individual trader, it's really difficult.
And what the point is.
At least the stock market is analysts, though. So if you're going into the sites, it's not really game. They tell you a lot of what's going to happen. Well, if you know what you're doing, it's very like.
And everyone says that.
It's very meticulous.
What's confusing about that is like,
The problem, crypto is just crypto is just a pure hope for speculation. Yeah, it's just pure, it's a pure.
that will go to
Scam.
cryptocurrency. That was like what it was originally, but now
I
it's
would
like.
disagree, but yeah. I think.
Well-
No, it's like it's better than having your money in, like if you just stack dollar bills in a deposit, because that's just going down to depreciation. But if you have it in Bitcoin, it's better. It really is, because that's going
I
up.
would beg you not to.
There's a limited amount of Bitcoin, there's an unlimited amount of US cash, so it's just gonna go down forever.
I would beg you not
I know, but
Just
like,
borrow money from the bank.
to. I would beg you not to.
take out a loan and gamble.
Exactly.
All right, everybody.
There's a brainstorm list. What's it about?
You have to do it. Oh, yeah, so you take out a sheet of paper, we'll do it right now. Take out a sheet of paper, number 1 to 15, and you gotta write a brainstorm list on the changes in the United States due to World War I. So, and that's all, so basically you write a brainstorm list on all these World War I. And sheet of paper one all the way up. Huh? Okay, good.
Can I take the quiz from
Yes.
So changes are causing
Changes. And so,
in the hauler?
so changes. So all you have to do is, but it's a brainstorm. So you just got to get down facts. Yes, it relates to changes, but anything has to do with World War I. Just